Sleep, the nocturnal retreat in which we must always return. For many, it is a time of privacy, of relaxation, reflection, and rest. It is where we can safely unwind from the troubles of the day, but it is also a time in which we are at our most vulnerable. Safe and sound in our beds, there are few monsters who aim to disrupt this peace. But imagine creatures so vile as to turn this dreamscape into one of nightmares, defiling our sanctity and leaving us terrified to go to sleep at night. Good evening, travelers. My name is Zenonaki, and in tonight's episode of Crypto Crossing, we're taking a look at the Succubus and the Popobawa to see which of these nocturnal devils makes the other into their prey. For the uninitiated, Crypto Crossing is the show where we look at who these monsters are, what they can do, and finally discuss why one of them would beat the other. Who is the Popobawa? The Popobawa is a Shetani or evil spirit said to reside in Tanzania, East Africa. The name Popobawa is Swahili in origin, literally meaning batwing. It earned this name due to the bat-shaped shadow it would cast during its nocturnal attacks. The name does not refer to the creature itself, as it is actually said to shapeshift between different forms, both human and animal. Unlike most monsters I've talked about so far, the Popobawa is of fairly recent origin, their earliest report coming from the island of Pemba in 1965, with Popobawa panics occurring every couple years. Their presence is often preceded by various supernatural occurrences, such as chills and poltergeist activity. They are also accompanied by the strong scent of brimstone, or as it's more commonly called, sulfur. Victims are usually targeted in the dead of night, often waking up to the Popobawa sitting on top of them to prevent them from moving, followed by physical assault, which sometimes warrants a visit to the hospital soon after. Following the attack, the Popobawa may move on to attack other members of the household, but what people fear most is the attacks that include sexual assault, sodomy targeted primarily towards men, but also affecting women and even children. The Popobawa then gives them an ultimatum that his victims must tell others about their attack, or else they will return again and again, with their attacks becoming more severe each time, forcing victims to publicly shame themselves by disclosing to everyone that the Popobawa had attacked them. Evil spirits like this are not uncommon in East African mythology. In fact, they earned the name Shetani, Swahili for devils. They come in many shapes and sizes, but commonly feature distorted human-like forms with only half their features. That is, one eye, one arm, one leg, a mouth without teeth, things like that. They also twist and contort themselves in bizarre and nonsensical positions. But unlike other Shetani seen in African folklore, the Popobawa is actually said to be a kind of genie, or spirit of Islamic folklore. The story goes that decades ago, a great and powerful sheik had traveled from the Middle East all the way to Zanzibar, bringing with him wealth and exotic gifts, including a genie that he kept sealed in a bottle. However, the sheik eventually grew angry with those around him and decided to release said genie in hopes of having it teach the locals a lesson. The newly freed Popobawa had no intention of following the sheik's orders, and instead ran amok, causing all sorts of trouble before finally escaping into the wild. Unlike other jinn, the Popobawa didn't decide to live quietly in hiding. Instead, he roams the region of East Africa, attacking civilians however he sees fit. Who is the Succubus? A succubus is a kind of female demon seen across European folklore. The term succubus originated in the 14th century with the Latin succubare, meaning to lie beneath or lie in bed with. The term evolved to describe prostitutes and eventually became synonymous with this promiscuous devil. They primarily prey upon unmarried males, while their male counterparts, the incubi, prey upon women. A nocturnal demon, the succubus is said to enter into the rooms of their targets in the middle of the night while they sleep. The succubus is then said to engage in sexual activity, often without the victim's consent or control. While modern depictions have the succubi as an attractive femme fatale, classical depictions describe them as horribly ugly and unhygienic, sometimes even with animal features, and encounters with them were said to be very traumatic. The origin of these demons is actually deeply rooted in Christian and Hebrew mythology, starting with the dawn of man in the Garden of Eden. There, the first man Adam was given life, but as the only human, Adam was lonely, thus a second human was created, Lilith. However, Lilith had no desire to marry Adam. Having been sculpted from the same primordial clay, Lilith desired to be an equal rather than be subservient and comply to marriage. Lilith chose to flee the garden, forcing Adam's next companion, Eve, to be created from his own rib. Left to her own devices, Lilith soon met up with the archangel Samael, whom she quickly grew attached to. For context, Samael is described as an archangel of death, a heavenly host whose duties serve the purpose of seducing and destroying. Falling into Samael's temptation, Lilith became lustful, soon marrying him and bearing her first children, many children in fact. To prevent their children from outnumbering those of Adam and Eve, God castrated Samael, prompting Lilith to seek out other partners to satisfy her lust. Lilith too was soon made infertile and unable to bear more children. However, the children she already had were still many in number. These half-angelic kin were named the Lilin and were unable to integrate with the angels or with man. Born purely of lust, they followed in their mother's footsteps and became promiscuous, further breeding until filling out their own distinct supernatural race, a race we now know today as the succubi and incubi. Now that we've learned a thing or two about who these monsters are tonight, let's get into the details of what they are and what they can do. While commonly called a shaitani or devil, the Popobawa is said to be a kind of genie, although he doesn't seem to demonstrate any standout traits that would indicate what particular kind he might be, other than a few generic characteristics such as his mist-like body capable of changing shape. Despite his shape-shifting nature, he most commonly appears as a bat-winged dwarf with a large cyclopean eye. Succubi are a class of nocturnal demons. In particular, they are the female members of the demon race known as the Lilin, while their male counterparts are known as incubi. They vary in appearance due to their shape-shifting nature, switching between ugly and beautiful, human and animal, often somewhere in between. Despite his size, the Popobawa is said to possess an above-average strength that allows him to physically overpower others, such as able-bodied adult males who make up the bulk of his victims. Moreover, it is not uncommon for victims to be sent to the hospital for severe contusions and even broken ribs due to the monster's roughness. This technically doesn't require superhuman strength to achieve. In fact, breaking ribs is sometimes a side effect of correctly performing CPR. It does, however, corroborate the Popobawa's unnatural strength for a creature of his size. While modern depictions of the succubus have her using seduction to lure her prey, classical depictions featured a less-than-beautiful demon using less-than-consensual means. While the incubi could be scaled to men of average strength, the succubi actually seem to subdue their victims using some of their supernatural powers, which I will discuss more in a bit. Neither monster here is noted as having any particular feats of speed, so there's very little to suggest which of them is faster. Instead, both are shown to employ stealth as their main means of entering people's rooms at night. Now, to preface this next part, Both of these monsters have a wide range of magical abilities, the bulk of which are designed to affect human targets. I cannot say for certain how these abilities would work on other supernatural beings like themselves, but for argument's sake, I will be assuming that they affect one another just as they would affect ordinary humans. With that said, let's get on with these abilities. Possibly a natural feature of genie physiology, the Popobawa is said to be very adept at shapeshifting. While its most common form is that of a cyclopean dwarf, other common features are large bat-like wings for flight as well as inhuman teeth and claws. He is also known to assume a smoke-like form used for stealthily entering places through cracks or open windows. The Popobawa is also said to possess a range of other unique supernatural characteristics. Their presence causes drops in temperature, a phenomenon closely associated with spectral hauntings. They're also responsible for poltergeist activity, causing items and furniture to move around on their own. This could either be a direct psychic influence on their part or a passive effect that follows them, as is common with poltergeist cases. As with other genie and shaitani, the Popobawa is said to possess human hosts, up to 7 at a time. These possessed hosts are made to carry out similar attacks. However, since they cannot simply turn into smoke to sneak into people's homes, the hosts make use of a special medicine that causes doors and walls to magically open up for them. But perhaps the most interesting of his abilities comes from his large singular eye. By meeting his gaze, Popobawa is said to fully paralyze his victims, rendering them totally immobile and allowing him to perform his vile acts without resistance. With many similarities to their opponent, the Succubus utilizes the ability to shapeshift, commonly either a voluptuous woman or an old hag. Features such as bat wings, serpentine tails, and bird-like claws are also common. They can alternatively become totally invisible and intangible, much like a sort of ghost. Because of this, succubi are naturally very difficult to harm, and any damage they take can easily be repaired by means of physical regeneration. But their magical power isn't infinite. They must draw their power from the energy of others. Rather than getting energy from food or the sun, succubi drain the life from their victims during moments of intimacy, causing the victims to weaken until eventually dying. While substantial harm is usually limited to sexual contact, mental and psychological damage can follow from simply observing the succubus. In fact, survivors of the succubi are said to slowly go insane as their life force continues to drain away from them after only one physical encounter. To a similar end, succubi are said to use the power of seduction to take control of weak-minded individuals, and sometimes outright possess their targets as means of draining their life force even faster. And finally, the succubi are said to induce sleep paralysis in order to have their way with some targets. The only basic limitation of this is that the target likely needs to already be asleep or at least be in bed first in order for it to work. Whether truly a genie or shaitani, the Popobawa has a weakness towards the Quran and other objects of Islamic significance, allowing him to be warded off using religious ceremonies or practices. Another common way people protect themselves against him is through open flames, the larger the better, as he seems to have a sort of pyrophobia. He holds a particular aversion to pig oil, potentially due to its relation to pigs and their role in the Abrahamic faiths. Physical weaknesses aside, the Popobawa's ego is more bark than bite, as he demonstrates cowardice when confronted by groups or by those he cannot easily overcome, preferring to make a speedy getaway if things ever get tough. In fact, during the heights of Popobawa panics, communities would have many individuals patrolling the streets or watching over those who sleep, an act which itself keeps the devil at bay. The succubus follows in suit with a lot of similar weaknesses. As a sort of demon, items of religious significance have a harmful effect, in particular those which pertain to Christianity, such as crucifixes or the Bible. Iron is also said to be effective, as is to be expected with monsters of European origin. Incubi, however, are said to lack these weaknesses altogether. The succubus is uniquely nocturnal, and has never been known to attack or be encountered during the day, although whether this is a personal preference or a weakness towards sunlight remains to be seen. Factoring in everything we've just discussed, I've come to believe the winner of this fight would be the succubus. Here's why. Physically, both are moderately close in stats, with neither having any particular gifts in strength or speed, and both display similar means of regeneration through shapeshifting. However, the Succubi's shapeshifting does seem to have a slight edge with their invisibility and intangibility. Both have their share of specific weaknesses, however most, if not all, are analogous to one another and likely wouldn't be exploited by each other in the same way humans would use them. The Popobawa may be able to possess multiple individuals to fight on his behalf, but the Succubus can similarly possess others as well as compel the minds of many more, theoretically without limit compared to the Popobawa's limit of 7. However, a battle of angry mobs is hardly the MO of either of these monsters. In fact, combat in general is hardly either's strong suit. I'm sure many of you watching this might be pondering what instead would happen if these two were to try and subdue one another to perform sexual acts, and I do think that this is the most likely outcome when dealing with these two. With that in mind, I think this scenario serves as the strongest nail in the Popobawa's coffin. The Popobawa may be able to paralyze victims by staring at them, but gazing at the Succubus causes damage to one's psyche. And while the Popobawa has sex to boost his own ego, the Succubi use sex as a means of gaining sustenance. If physical attacks don't suffice to harm either, the theft of one's life energy surely turns the tables in this conflict, making the Shaitani weaker and the demon stronger. And finally, while the Popobawa would certainly be able to make a clean getaway once he realizes he's in over his head, the mental leeching of the Succubus would linger long after their encounter. Whether or not he manages to survive, the Succubus holds a clear advantage over him. It is for all these reasons why I believe the winner of this encounter would be the Succubus. I hope you all enjoyed the video as much as I did making it. Do you agree with my reasoning? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to leave a suggestion for any monsters or matches you'd like to see covered in the future. If you'd like to see more episodes like this, then please be sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss future uploads. Until next time, this is Ben Zenanaki, signing off.